When you hear the word Constitution, what comes to mind? Probably some old, dusty document, right? Full of boring legal stuff. But what if we looked at it in a totally different way? Like, what if it was the actual architectural blueprint for an entire country? Well, that's exactly how we're going to look at the Constitution of Singapore today.
All right, let's really get into this. See, Singapore's constitution isn't just a list of do's and don'ts. It's the master plan. It literally designs the whole structure of the government, it defines how the state and its citizens interact, and it's the foundation that every single other law has to be built on. You could even think of it as the ultimate source code for the entire republic.
Okay, so here's the plan for our little tour of this national blueprint. First, we'll talk about why it's the supreme law. Then, we'll get into the fundamental rights it gives you. After that, we'll check out the 3 main pillars of government, dig into the president's unique second key, and finally, we'll see how it protects the nation's independence. Ready? Let's go. First things first, we have to start with the most important idea of all, the one concept that everything else rests on, and that is the Constitution's absolute supreme authority. So, let's stick with that blueprint idea. Imagine the entire nation is a massive building project. The Constitution? That's the master blueprint. And I mean master blueprint. Nobody, not the government, not the lawmakers, nobody, can just decide to add a new wall or a window if it's not in that original plan. Every single thing they do has to follow that blueprint, no exceptions. And this isn't just a nice idea. This is where you see the blueprint's real power. Check out this quote from Article 4. The key word here, the one with all the teeth, is void. What does that mean? It means if any law gets passed that goes against the Constitution, poof, it's gone. It's legally null, it has no effect whatsoever. The blueprint always wins. Okay, so we've established the Constitution is the top dog, the supreme law. But what does that actually mean for you, for me, for everyday people? Well, that's where we're going next. We're talking about the fundamental liberties it protects. This is where the blueprint really gets personal. So the big question is, what rights does this blueprint actually lock in for you as a citizen? What are those core protections that are basically hardwired into the entire system? Right, so here are some of the big ones, all laid out in Part 4 of the Constitution. You've got things like liberty of the person, equal protection under the law, and freedoms of speech, assembly, and religion. These are really the core of the deal between you and the state. But, and this is a really crucial point, these rights aren't unlimited. The Constitution itself says they can be restricted for reasons like public order or national security. So what you have is this constant balancing act between an individual's freedom and the needs of the country as a whole. And that balancing act is a key feature of this whole blueprint. Okay, so we've covered the supreme law and the rights of the people. Now let's look at the actual machinery of the government itself, how the blueprint designs the state. It's all built on 3 main pillars, and the whole point is to create a separation of powers. Pillar number 1, the legislature. You probably know it as Parliament. In our blueprint analogy, these are the architects. Their job is to design and create the laws. But, and you're probably sensing a theme here, they always have to make sure their new plans don't clash with that master blueprint, the Constitution. Next, we've got the executive. This is basically the cabinet, led by the Prime Minister. So, if the legislature are the architects drawing up the plans, the executive, they're the construction crew. They're the ones on the ground, running the government day to day, and putting all those laws into action. And the third and final pillar is the judiciary. We're talking about the courts. And their role? They're kind of like the building inspectors. They have to interpret the laws and, most importantly, they act as the umpire, making sure that both the architects, the legislature, and the construction crew, the executive, are playing by the rules of the master blueprint. All right, now for something that's pretty unique to Singapore's constitutional blueprint. And that's the special custodial role of the president. This is way more than just being a ceremonial figurehead who cuts ribbons. So yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. The president in Singapore basically has 2 jobs. On one hand, you have the head of state role, which is mostly ceremonial. But the Constitution gives the president a second, much more powerful job, to be the guardian of the nation's finances and public service integrity. People often call this the second key. The idea is, while the government has the first key to the country's savings, the president holds a second one, and you need both to unlock it. It's a really critical safeguard. So how does this whole second key thing actually work? Well, the Constitution gives the president what are called discretionary powers, basically the power to act on their own judgment. They can say no to a government budget that tries to dip into past reserves. They can veto the appointment of key people in the public service. And they can even greenlight an anti-corruption investigation if the prime minister won't. It's a seriously powerful check and balance built right into the system.
And for our last stop on this tour, let's look at maybe the most fundamental thing of all: how the blueprint protects its own existence and the independence of the very nation it helped create.
Here it is, Article 3. It's short, it's simple, but it is incredibly powerful. Singapore shall be a sovereign republic. That's it. That is the core declaration of nationhood, right there in the foundational document.
But, you know, a statement is one thing, words on a page. The real question is, how does the blueprint make sure that this independence, this sovereignty, can't just be given away or signed over easily?
The answer comes down to this one number: 2/3. See, Article 6 of the Constitution says that Singapore's sovereignty can't be surrendered without a national referendum. And it's not just a simple 51% vote. Nope. At least 2/3 of all registered voters have to say yes. That is an incredibly high bar to clear. It makes it almost impossible to give away the country's independence without a massive, overwhelming wave of public support.
So when you put it all together, from its position as the supreme law, to the rights it protects for all of us, to the way it structures the government and builds in these unique safeguards, you can see the Constitution is so much more than a document. It really is a living blueprint. It's not some dusty relic. It's an active, working framework that continues to guide the nation.
And that really leaves us with one final big question to think about. This blueprint, it was designed for a young nation just starting out, but it's still shaping a modern, constantly evolving one today. So the question for the future is, how will this foundational blueprint continue to guide Singapore's path forward through all the new challenges and opportunities that are sure to come?